Hello, welcome to today's session. Today we will be covering the next 15 set of questions for UGC June 2014 examination for Psychology paper 3. So let's start with the first question. In this question, it's a kind of very tricky question and challenging question for most of the students. So this question is basically on signal detection theory, and the question asks about what would be the behavior of liberal observer. Now, before we try to answer this question, let's first understand the signal detection theory. Under signal detection theory, what happened is basically the author here tries to focus on the response that is given in a very simple mathematical model to transmit signals for decision making. So what happens is, if there is a signal which is present and I say yes, I can see that is a true positive response. If there is no signal, still I feel there is signal. That means it's a case of false alarm. Okay. If there is a signal but I miss it, for example, there is a red light on a traffic, like on a place where there is traffic light, and I miss that traffic light. So the signal is present, but I say no, I forgot it, I didn't see it. So it's miss. And when there is no signal and I say that I did not see anything, that means there is a correct rejection. So hit is correct and correct rejection is correct. These two are kind of type 1, type 2 errors that we will understand more in the section on statistics. Now in this section, it's important to understand. So here are two diagrams that I am trying to explain. One is for the conservative group of people and another is for the liberal group of people. Now the question here is on liberal group. So I'll start with liberal group. What would be the answer for liberal group of people? Liberal group of people will be liberal and will usually say yes to most of the responses. So for example, there are 100 questions asked in a test. They will say yes to almost everything, for example. That means all the hits were correct and there were also a lot of false alarm because there is no signal, but they said that there is signal. There was no there should not be any response on some of the questions, but they gave some response which was incorrect. So in this case, hit rate is high and false alarm rate is high. On the other hand, in conservative, people usually tend to say no to most of the issues because they say no, and like there are 100 questions and they would be answering no to most of this, there would be a lot of correct rejections and a lot of misread. So there would be like out of 100, there are say 50 questions which are incorrect. So they would reject that correctly because they are saying no to those questions. And they will also miss the correct answers for a lot of questions. So the no is large for conservative people and yes is large for liberal people. So liberal observers are more biased for yes responses. Okay, they have high hit rate and high false alarm rate. That is again correct, and equally likely to make yes or no responses. That is again correct. Sorry, not this one. The greater expectation that the signal is present because they are liberals. So since they are saying yes to it, they feel that there is always a signal that is present. So one, you have 1, 4 and 6 are the correct options. So you have 1, 4 and 6. That's B is the correct answer for this question. Okay. Now let's move on to the next set of questions. The next set of questions here you have talk about a lot of assertion reason questions. So the first question is, which of the following characterizes slow wave sleep? Now stage 3 and 4 were reclassified as N3 sleep in 2007, and this is the deepest phase of the sleep. Okay, since this is the deepest phase of the sleep, we can say they characterize slow waves because brain is less responsive to external things that are happening, and it is the hardest stage when it is very difficult for a person to make awake a person. Okay, so stage 3 and 4 characterize the slow wave sleep. So this is kind of direct question. The next question is here, the assertion reason question. Now, the interior third ventricle. This is mainly related to intake of water. So when I am talking about intake of water, if there is a damage to this, my intake of water would decrease. Okay, and if there is a very severe damage, what would happen? I would go into a phase of adipsia. That means some of the nerves will never recover voluntary drinking. Means some of the nerves will never say feel that they want to drink, or the person will never have that feeling that I want to drink. So therefore, we can say damage to anterior third ventricle results in adipsia. That's correct. And also damage to third anterior ventricle leads to inhibition in drinking. It's not a stimulation but damage. So reason is incorrect and assertion is correct. Okay. The next question is about subliminal perception. Subliminal, sub means below the threshold, okay, and super means above. So subliminal perception, that means you are detecting a stimulus which is below the absolute threshold. For example, you are having a severe toothache, okay, and in routine there are a lot of hoardings and advertisements on the road, but you never try to see them, or you'd never focus them. But since you are having a severe toothache, every time you are crossing the road, all the boards which are having information on dental clinics, you will have a constant attention on those boards. So that is subliminal perception. You are not willingly seeing those, but that is subconsciously acting over it, or it's below the absolute threshold. So that is what is subliminal perception. So assertion is correct. Then you have receptors always receive information, that is correct, but that is always perceived. This is incorrect. We cannot say that all the information that is received by the receptor is only perceived. Okay, so that's a kind of incorrect statement. So A is correct and reason is incorrect. Now the next question: which of the following are not the functions of working memory? So the working memory model by Bradley talked about three loops. So what were those three loops? You have the phonological loop, the visuospatial loop. These both fall under the central executive. Okay. So the phonological deals with the spoken language, visual deals with the written language. Okay, and both of them combinedly form the central executive, which controls and coordinates both phonological and visual spatial loop, and finally this helps you to retain memory into the, or release memory into the long term form, basically long term memory. Okay, so since this is the process, and we can say that how it's basically the short term memory we are talking about here. So the short-term memory, how can it be strengthened? So working memory mainly deals with short-term memory. So it's a storage and executive functions. So which of following are not the functions? So not here is very important. So we are talking, so let's see which of the following are the functions. So we can say central executive, so you have executive functions. And since we are talking about short-term memory, we are talking about the concept of chunking or grouping the concepts to remember them better. So 2 and 5 are correct. So the only incorrect options are 1, 3 and 4. So 1, 3 and 4 would be the answer in this case. Now next question. The next question is about learning disability. Before we read the question and try to solve it, first let's understand what is learning disability. Learning disability or learning disorder is a kind of umbrella of variety of terms. So a child or person who has problem to see, hear, write would all be classified under learning disability. Now, the symptoms for each one of them would be different. The solutions and coping mechanism for each of the learning disability student would be different. Now, it's very important that these learning disability students, we cannot say they are low in IQ, they are poorly motivated, or they cannot perform well. It's just they have problems with learning. That's the only issue here. Okay. Now let's read the first statement. Children with learning disability are allowed to type and tape record the assignment. Now this can happen in case of a child suffering from learning disability in writing. If a child cannot write what he wants to express, so what can be alternatively done? He can speak and someone can type, or he can speak and that can be tape recorded as an assignment. So this is the correct answer. Omitting handwriting for evaluating copies is a way of helping children with learning disability in writing. That is again correct, because if I am asking not to do a handwriting, he'll perform well. Okay. So assertion is correct, reason is correct, and in this case, I'm with the reason I'm trying to explain. Because I'm omitting handwriting, what alternatively I can do is either I can type the assignment or tape record the assignment. So assertion is correct and reason is correct, and I can say that reason is the correct explanation for the assertion. Now let's move on to the next set of questions here. Under the next set of questions, you have the first question, which is based on list. So you have two sets here and you have to match the list. Now first try to understand the terms. If you understand the meaning, you will automatically be able to match the description. Now what is escalation of commitment? I'll start with escalation of commitment. Escalation of commitment means, for example, I'm very fond of investing in share market. Okay, I invested say 20,000 rupees in share market in just a single company. Okay, and after 10 years, I realized that company is suffering huge losses, and whatever I invested was totally has gone waste. Still, I will not accept that. Okay, and despite of having a bad experience, I'll invest again whatever amount I have, for example 10,000, to the same share in the share market. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to adhere to the best decision despite the losses have occurred. I'm saying that no, I have a hope that this share might rise. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to adhere to my bad decision constantly. So that is what is escalation of commitment. Now what is planning fallacy? Planning fallacy is basically now recently there are floods in Kashmir. So if I as a planning commission member or as a rescue team, I feel 10,000 people should be sent there for the rescue operations. Okay. Despite of having 10,000 people here, I underestimate my resources. That 10,000 people might be less, might be we would need more. That much amount of money that is going into Kashmir is not sufficient. So that is a kind of planning fallacy. I'm trying to underestimate the resources to achieve a goal. The next is confirmation biasness. What is confirmation biasness? I try to pay attention to the things that already exist in my views. For example, I have something in my mind already, then I'll pay much more attention to it. So I try to do a confirmation biasness. I try to focus onto the same issue again and again because I have a previous or an existing idea about that question. Finally is counterfactual thinking. In counterfactual thinking, I try to evaluate the events by thinking about the alternatives. Okay. So I'm looking on to what else can be done. Okay, here is the problem. I should do this. I should do this. So I'm trying to look onto as many alternatives as possible. So here is where we can understand the various concepts and description. Now the Cattell's culture fair test. Cattell's culture fair test is basically talks about fluid intelligence. So you have abstract, basically kind of fluid intelligence is abstract. It's non-verbal. So it is fair across culture. So culture fair test, Cattell's culture fair test basically measures fluid intelligence. The next question is a assertion reason based question. Now, lesions on amygdala decrease emotional response. That is a correct statement. Okay. The memory of frightening event is poor in people damaged with amygdala. So I'll give you an example here. For example, there is a patient whose amygdala is damaged and he's told a violent story along with pictures. Okay, so you have a violent story along with pictures. So what would happen here is he would not remember that story and its relation to the pictures that better as a normal person would. So its memory of frightening events is poor because the amygdala is damaged. So emotional response decreases and memory of frightening event is also poor. So both of the statements are correct, but they are not mutually related to one another. So this was the next question that we have discussed. Now let's move on to the next set of questions here. Now here is the various models that we need to match with the explanation. So it's a kind of very simple question. Here just to try matching the phrases. So matching template. Okay. So I'm matching the whole to the stored of the whole object. So that is template matching. Matching peacock to peacock is template matching. Matching features, where I'm trying to extract features from the image and match it to the features of the object. For example, beak of a bird is similar to peak of a mountain, for example. So I'm trying to match the features and they look similar. Okay, so you have feature matching clear, you have template matching clear. Now then is recognition by components. What is recognition by components? In recognition by components, what I am trying to do here is, I am trying to understand three-dimensional objects by specifying their parts. So you have a three-dimensional object, say a cube. I am trying to understand that cube by understanding the part. For example, I have a mug here. Okay, I am saying this is the mug and this looking like ear is the handle for the mug. So I am recognizing individual component. That's basically a three-dimensional structure that I am trying to understand. The next question here is configural model. So I am trying to distinguish objects that share some basic parts and the overall structure. So I'm basically configuring that structure first and then trying to relate it. The next question, you have the process and the principle. So under effortful processing, since I'm doing something effortfully, I'm trying to intentionally encode the information. So effortful processing requires intentional encoding. Then mnemonics, one of the very good strategies used for mnemonics is method of loci. In method of locus, what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to understand, for example, I am from a city called Delhi. Okay, so since I am familiar to that city, I can remember things. Okay, say Parliament House. So I remember the location, and because I'm remembering the location, any information that is coming in about Parliament House would be much more familiar to me. So mnemonics, a classic example or a process is method of loci. You have encoding specificity principle. What is that? Under encoding specificity, what I am trying to do? I am trying to use the context-dependent memory, okay, where the recall would be best. So I am trying to understand the same phenomena in the same environment as it is learned. And finally is imagination inflation. Under imagination inflation, I am creating false memories about things. So I am trying to imagine an event which has never happened, so that the confidence level can increase, and it's basically a kind of false memory. The next question, which of the following phrases is incorrect regarding prejudice? Unfavorable or negative actions towards a member or a group of people is the definition for prejudice, and it's not one of the causes of its origin. So all three are the causes except the last one. The next question, you have a list of meta needs and metapathology. Meta needs are something you need to do. Okay, and failure to do that leads to metapathology. For example, I like to speak truth, but if I'm not able to speak truth, people will develop mistrust with me. Okay, I like to do things with a high perfection, but if I'm not able to do the things with perfection, I will feel myself that I am hopeless. I would feel about myself that I am hopeless. I cannot do these things properly. Justice. I like to get justice, but if I don't get justice, what would happen? I would become angry. I like to do goodness, okay? And if there is no goodness, if I see some people are very cruel or they are not doing good, I'll feel hatred towards that sect of people. Okay, so these are the ways you relate meta needs, which are the basic needs that you need, and metapathology when you fail to acquire those needs that turn into metapathology. So here are the set of questions that we have solved. Now moving on to the next and the final set of questions here. So you have the last two questions. According to Sternberg's theory, which of the following is associated with the performance component? Now Sternberg's theory gave three components. Under Sternberg's theory, the three components are meta components, then you have performance components and knowledge acquisition components. Okay. And here what we are talking about is just the performance component. So under performance component, I try to carry out the direction of meta components. Meta components is solving a problem. Okay. Under performance components, I try to perceive the problems in long-term memory. I try to develop relationships and apply those relationships. Okay, so that is what is performance component is all about. So the answer here is perceptual processing and retrieval from long-term memory is the correct option for Sternberg's theory on performance component. And finally, you have knowledge acquisition where I try to learn and store new information that is coming into my mind. Now the last question, situational leadership. I have to match the theories with the propounders. So situational leadership theory was given by Harry and Blanchard. They said that situations make a man. So effective leadership originates only when there is a task which is relevant and that a person needs to do. The next is cognitive resource theory developed by Fittler and Gracia. So you have the cognitive resource theory by Fittler and Gracia, where they try to focus on leaders' intelligence and their experience to stress. So if the leader is able to face the situation under stress, or the ability of the leader, then he is a good leader. He has good understanding and good resources. So that is cognitive resource theory given by Fittler and Gracia. You have the Vroom's and Yetton's model on normative decision theory. Now, what is the normative decision theory given by Vroom? Under this theory, Vroom tries to predict the effectiveness of decision-making process. How effectively I can take a decision under a situation. Okay, so that was the concept given by Vroom. And finally, you have the path goal theory by Robert House. Under path goal theory, what the author or Robert House is trying to explain is the leader's behavior is contingent to satisfaction and performance of the subordinates. So, for example, if all the people under me are doing good, I'll be happy and I'll be satisfied. So that is what is about the path goal theory. So these were the set of questions for today. In the next session, we will be talking about the final 15 questions of this class. Of these 5 questions would be based on a passage, and that passage is a really challenging passage. It is based on ANOVA and F-test calculation. So stay tuned for the final section on psychology UGC. Have a good day ahead.